Good evening, everyone. Allison Skalberg here. We're here tonight with ADDA, Attention Deficit Disorders Association, Southern Region. It's been around since 1987. They have groups all over the state. It was founded by Pam Esser back in 1987. And this group here that I have been leading, I don't know, it's probably been 10 years, Lindsay. I don't know. Lindsay and I started this group together a long time ago. But this is predominantly a parent group for families who have kids with ADHD and other comorbid conditions. We have a lot of families that come on and their child might be on the spectrum or what have you. So we meet once a month. We meet by Zoom. We have a different speaker every month, and we are excited to have Dr. Lindsay Asawa back here with beautiful brain psychology. So she's going to be taking a deep dive with us tonight on surviving summer break with ADHD and really preparing for a smooth transition as you move forward. So before we get started, I just want to say for tonight, so if you're planning your evening, I know sometimes the evenings are hectic at home. I don't know if your house is like mine, but anyway, we're going for an hour. This is being recorded. Everybody is going to get a copy of the slides that she's going over tonight and an email with a link to the recording. You're also going to get the details of joining the ADA organization. I think it's about $40 a year. It's really cheap, and they put on a great conference, lots of resources out there. And if you are a parent with a loved one with ADHD, I know myself, I could use all the resources I could get. So I know that the organization as a whole has been a help to a lot of people. But having said that, because there are groups all over town, there are groups for adults with ADHD as well. All these groups are free. You do not have to join. But joining will give you access to other resources and their conference that they do that is pretty great. So having said that, I want to give as much time as possible to Dr. Asawa. If you wrote in a question, we had two write-in questions. She will address those. One she addressed by email and the other one she'll address tonight. We are in webinar mode, and so in case you're wondering, we can't see you or hear you, but we know you're there and we're glad that you're here, and we invite you to put your questions in the chat box as we go along. So having said that, Lindsay, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Allison. So I have a slide at the end that tells a little bit more about my practice, but I am a licensed psychologist. I specialize in working with children and teens and have been doing this for many years now. I do also really kind of specialize in working with kids and teens and adults with ADHD brains because that's just an area I've become interested in over the years and have done a lot of work in this area and with clients that have a diagnosis of ADHD. And currently at my practice, I do evaluations. I have two other school psychologists that work with me. We evaluate kids and adults of all ages. We do lots and lots of ADHD evaluations as well as other types of evaluations. And so this is just a topic I'm very familiar with. And also on a personal level, I'm familiar with it as a parent and family member of individuals with ADHD brains. I have three kids in middle school and high school right now, and two out of the three have formal ADHD diagnoses. The third most likely also has an ADHD brain. And so this is something that I understand from the perspective of a parent and a clinician working with clients. And so I've gathered lots of tips and ideas over the years from working with my own kids and working with clients to kind of give you guys some suggestions about summertime because I know it can be a challenging time. So, a couple of the um, well, okay, this is the question I wanted to start with. Why would summer break be a challenging time with kids who have ADHD brains? And there's several reasons. I mean, some of them I think you could kind of guess, but there are quite a few challenges that we face in the summertime. So there's less structure in the summer. You know, kids have during the school year, they have the structure of the school day, which they don't enjoy school, but having that structure is actually really, really good for our kids with ADHD brains because they're kind of they don't have a lot of internal structure. There's a lack of what we will talk about in a minute, executive functioning skills. So they need that external structure. And in the summer, that's oftentimes taken away, which can be a challenge. Sleep is often disrupted in the summertime because we're not always sticking with that regular sleep schedule that they need for the school year. And we know that our kids with ADHD brains are highly impacted by sleep and changes in sleep. And that can then impact their ADHD symptoms and their behaviors. Another challenge is in the summertime, there tends to be a more risk of overstimulation. So our kids with ADHD brains also have trouble regulating stimulation, and the stimulation of their brain and their frontal lobe in particular. And because of that, not only might that area of their brain be understimulated, but they can also become overstimulated pretty easily when just there's a lot going on, there's not a lot of structure, a little more chaotic in the summertime, and that can lead to those episodes of overstimulation. In the summer, things also tend to be pretty inconsistent because every day might be a little bit different, and kids with ADHD tend to do better with consistency. Boredom, very common in the summertime when the kids are not in camps or any type of structured program. And it's good for kids to be bored. We need them to learn how to tolerate boredom, but it also, with kids who have ADHD brains, boredom is particularly challenging and torturous to them sometimes. Um, Also, there are very clear expectations during the school year. They have to adjust to those expectations both at school and at home. But in the summertime, those expectations may change. And even though to us as parents, we think the expectations are obvious, it's not always obvious to them. So they may be kind of testing boundaries a little bit more, doing things they normally wouldn't do. The environment changes because they're not in school, but they might be in other environments during the summertime, whether it's camps or whether it's vacations, going to other places, staying at other people's homes, family members' homes. And the different environments very much can have an impact on what behaviors you see. Too much together time. So I think the summertime is a great opportunity for spending time together as a family, but for kids and especially siblings, it can be a little bit challenging to have too much time together, seeing the same person every day, spending lots of hours together every day, and that can lead to just some frustrations and arguments. And screen time is a biggie. It's hard as parents, it's hard to keep our kids entertained and have things for them all day, every day. And so we rely on those screens. And unfortunately, our kids with ADHD brains are very drawn to technology. They're very drawn to the stimulation that the screens provide and the devices provide. And so there is very much a temptation towards that in the summertime. And it's a little bit hard as parents for us to manage that in the summer. And we know that it can actually impact their behavior when they're spending too much time on screens. And then for us as parents, another challenge is just that we're not getting as many breaks. They're not at school, they're at home. We may or may not be at home with them. And they may be, in camps or other places at times, but there's still a lot more time that we are spending parenting them and managing their behaviors. And so that can also be hard on our patients as parents. So I'm not going to go into this a lot today, but I did want to give one slide, a really quick overview of the ADHD brain and how it's wired, because this is why I'm going to give you some of these tips that I'm going to mention today. They all relate back to understanding how your child's brain is wired. If we have an understanding of that, then we can have a much better plan for the summertime and how to make sure that it goes smoothly. So you can see in the pictures that when you look at a non-ADHD brain and an ADHD brain, there's a difference there in the level of stimulation. That's the red areas you see. Research for decades has been showing that there's a difference in the level of stimulation, particularly in the front part of the brain, and that can lead to a variety of different challenges. And those are on the other side of the screen, those executive functioning skills. And there's a whole set of them, but they're basically things controlled by that frontal lobe of the brain. And these are the things that our kids with ADHD brains tend to struggle with. And so these are things that they may need our help and support with, even during the summertime. Sometimes even more so during the summertime because we also don't have school and teachers partnering with us to help in those ways. So, what do they need then? Knowing how their brain functions and how their brain is wired, what do they need? So this list here is based on lots and lots of research, experts in the field, and my own decades now of experience working with these kids. These are the things that we know that they need, and they need these during the school year, but they very much need them in the summertime as well. We can't just throw all rules out the window in the summer. It doesn't work as well for our kids with ADHD. They really rely on structure. They need structure, even though they often will fight it, but they do better with structure and knowing what to expect. And consistency kind of goes along with that. Being consistent, following the same routines. Now, food and sleep and exercise are three big things that highly impact the ADHD brain. If any of these things are not going well, you will notice it in your child's ADHD symptoms. So, making sure, even in the summertime, that they're eating healthy foods, they're getting enough sleep, they're getting some exercise every day, which sometimes can be easier in the summertime. They need playtime. They also need, even though they need some structure to their day, they also need time within that structure just to play and be themselves and be loud and make messes and have fun. Chores are such a good thing, and we'll talk about that, but they're particularly helpful for kids with ADHD for various reasons. And summer is a great time to get them into those habits of doing chores. And they do need supervision, even into teenage years. Our kids with ADHD brains tend to have more difficulty with decision making and problem solving, more difficulty with impulsivity. And because of that, things can go wrong. And I've heard some pretty crazy stories from families whose kids are old enough that you would assume they would know better. But when they're left without supervision in the summertime, they're more likely to make some choices that may not be the best. So they need supervision, they need rules, they need to know what the expectations are. We can't assume that they know because they need it to be clear and stated for them. They need praise and incentives. And this doesn't mean just general, good job. This means be very specific. Let them know what you see them doing and what you're proud of and what's going well. And then they do better with these external incentives because the way that their brain is wired, they're less motivated internally and more motivated by some of these external incentives. So it's okay to put those in place in the summertime so that we can make sure it goes smoothly and they're successful and they feel good about themselves and there's less conflict. And then academic support, summertime is a good time for that as well, even though we don't need to bombard them with academics over the summer. But taking a 3-month break from academics can be extra difficult for kids with ADHD brains. And so keeping that up to some degree can be really helpful. So I'm going to go through each of these things and I have slides that give you lots more details and suggestions and tips, some practical tips. As far as structure goes, there's lots of ideas that I've used over the years with my own kids and with my clients. But in the summertime, try to have some sort of daily routine, even though each day may be a little bit different. But having some general structure to the day is just helpful for them to know what to expect. And they tend to push boundaries less, and there's less tantrums, less arguments, less conflict if they just know what the routine is and what's expected of them. Keep it visual as much as you can. What we do, we always have a calendar for the summer, and I would encourage you, if you haven't done it yet, to do it now. Now is a good time. Buy a calendar or print out just the months of June, July, and August, and start planning out that calendar and writing in any vacations that you're going to be doing, any summer camps they might be doing, and then come up with kind of a structure. So, especially for our younger kids, the elementary age kids, it's really nice for them to have similar to what teachers do at school, but kind of have something that they know is coming and something to look forward to. So, you can do the same thing on the same day each week. So, we would have like library day once a week. We would go to the library, spend a little time there. They can return their books, check out books, practice being quiet and reading for a little bit. It's a good skill to practice in the summertime. We would also do Fun Friday. Lots of families do that and come up with a fun activity or a trip that you go on for the day. Um, One thing that my kids have enjoyed is at the beginning of the summer creating a bucket list of whatever those fun activities are going to be. And then we'll talk about it and we'll pick a different fun activity to do each Friday. Something like that just gives them some structure, something to look forward to and to work towards. And then meal times, we talked about eating healthy and how important that is, but it needs to still be pretty consistent. In the summertime, it can get very inconsistent. Kids can eat at various times of day, eat lots of junk food, lots of snacking, and that's not a horrible thing. But for kids with ADHD, they do best with the consistent meal times and with healthy snacks that are going to be helpful in stimulating the brain. So that's high protein snacks, low sugar snacks. If there is junk available and they have lots of free time, they're going to go for that. So keeping some grab and go healthy snacks available, just doing a little bit of prep at the beginning of each week or the beginning of the summer, buying some of these healthy snacks, making some little snack packs and having those available and ready. So when they go to grab something, they have some healthier options. And then the chores, I have another slide that I'll talk more about that. So I'll skip that for now. But screen time, so the structure applies to screen time as well. And what I would suggest there is delay it because, and this always worked for us, it we would delay the screen time as much as possible, make sure that they have other things built into the day that they need to do first, because once they're on screens, it's tricky to get them off, and it's very difficult sometimes to enforce those time limits, although they need time limits. So delaying it tends to work pretty well. I have a couple of examples here of things that we've used and that my clients have used. So this screen time checklist would be for kids who are a little bit older and more independent. And they can kind of go through and check off their list of have you done these things? And it includes a balance because their days need to be balanced. They need to have a chore that they do. They need to play outside for a little bit and get some exercise. They need to read for a little bit. They need to make sure that they're eating, they're getting dressed, brushing their teeth, all of those daily routine tasks, and make sure they check them all off, and then they can have screen time. One thing that I did with my kids also is I would make screen time start at a certain time. So even if you finished all these, because sometimes they'll rush through them as quick as they can so they can get to the screens, then I would say, but then you cannot start screen time until this particular time. And that actually required them to then go find something else to do, spend more time reading, spend more time outside until they're allowed to have that screen time. The picture on the right is just one of our many different charts or strategies that we use. These are some little, they're kind of similar to post-it notes, but they use static cling, and so they would slide across the fridge. So we would have a to-do side and a done side. And I've done it also where I involved two of my kids, two out of the three, and they would move a magnet over from one side to the to-do side to the done side. So there's different ways to get them involved, make it interactive, but have that structure. And I try to still keep the structure flexible. So it doesn't mean you have to have from 10 a.m. to 10:30 a.m., you need to do this. We don't need structure that's that rigid. They do need some flexibility, and there needs to be free time built in, free play. But just having that day and that plan is good for them, and it reduces a lot of the stress and tension and arguments. So sleep is the next one. I have a whole webinar that I've done on sleep. There's a free um, link to that on my website, and I'll show you my website at the end here, but I have several pre-recorded webinars from past ADDA meetings, and you guys can check those out if you want to go into more detail for some of these topics. But some quick things about sleep in the summertime. One thing we know about sleep is that consistency is key. If you become inconsistent about sleep, it will lead to some sleep challenges. And that those may then carry over into the school year. So I would just stick with a pretty consistent routine. You can make some shifts, but try to avoid major shifts in their bedtime or major changes in their routine. It's actually pretty helpful for kids with ADHD brains to keep things pretty consistent and keep them on a somewhat typical routine because it also makes it less challenging than when the summer ends. One thing we know about sleep with kids who have that lack of stimulation in the frontal lobe is that when they are not getting enough sleep, we see a worsening of some of those executive functioning difficulties and attention problems and hyperactivity and impulsivity. We also see some emotional side effects, irritability, agitation, and then some behavior problems as a result. So you're going to see a difference. I'm sure many of you have seen a difference in your kids whenever they're not getting enough sleep. And that can certainly creep up in the summertime when they're staying up really late at night and not getting enough sleep, or their sleep schedule has become pretty inconsistent. So, one major important strategy, even in the summertime, is to try to reduce some stimulation before bedtime. So, no screens, no caffeine, no sugar, no exercise right before bed. And again, that's a little bit harder in the summertime. I know that a lot of these things tend to slide, and families don't necessarily reinforce these rules or enforce these rules in the summer. But I would highly encourage you to keep some of these things in place because I think it's going to just make it a happier, smoother summer for everyone. And then when school starts, when it gets closer, maybe a couple weeks before school starts, then the plan is to start shifting that bedtime a little bit earlier and a little bit earlier so that it's not a sudden, back to school, go to bed early, because that's going to be a really tough transition for them. And they're going to spend some time very tired at the beginning of the school year. I have a little chart here on the right-hand side just to give you a general rule of what is recommended based on research for different age groups, how many hours of sleep that they need. And there is a range because it depends on the child, but in the summer, these numbers don't change. They still need to be getting these amounts of sleep each night in order to be at their best and for their brain to function at its best. So another big thing in the summer that they need, or they really need year round, but they can definitely get this in the summer, is movement and playtime. We do know that movement and activity, physical activity, it actually turns on that switch in the frontal lobe. It stimulates the brain. And you can see in these brain scans on the right side of the screen that there's a big difference when someone is exercising or not exercising. There's a much higher level of stimulation. And what that does is then it improves those executive functioning skills. And so it prevents some of the challenges, the ADHD challenges. So movement is a really great thing, and incorporating that every day, if possible, is a great thing. We also know that daytime exercise can lead to better nighttime sleep, particularly for kids with ADHD brains. Wearing them out is a great thing because it can help them to fall asleep faster and have fewer sleep issues. Now, a lot of our kids with ADHD tend to have sensory seeking behaviors. They really enjoy sensory input. And so the summer's a great time for water play and, getting that sensory input. So there's swimming, splash pads, running in the sprinklers in the yard. For younger kids, playing at the water tables, going to the beach, having the sand sensory play in addition to the water. Now, some kids are sensory averse and they don't enjoy these things as much, but just know your child, whatever it is that they are drawn to and that they seem to find soothing and enjoyable, the summer is a great time to give them some of that sensory input. Outdoor play is such a good thing for them, but I know it's hot in the summertime, so we have to juggle the heat, be careful about the heat, but make sure that they are getting outside, playing on playgrounds, going for bike rides, playing sports. just playing with the neighbors in the yard, whatever they can do. Having that free play time is so good for them. There's so many skills that they learn from that, but it also stimulates their brain and wears them out. So it's kind of serves multiple purposes. There are, thinking about the heat, there are some indoor sensory gyms that you can also look into that are wonderful, and they're a great way to give them that sensory play, exercise, being able to climb around, have fun, get out that energy, but be indoors for a little bit in the air conditioning. So that's another option. Fidget toys, we use them all the time with my kids, in my office with my clients. I just keep a basket of fidget toys always available, at home and in my office. And I highly recommend that in the summertime as well, especially if there are things they're going to be doing that don't allow them to move. Let's say they're going to be doing some tutoring in the summertime, or a summer camp that involves sitting and doing other things. Keeping a fidget toy with them is a great way for them to just fidget and still have that movement, so they can be keeping their brain stimulated. Going on vacations, make sure to bring some fidget toys with you. We keep fidget toys in the car, so anytime we're driving over to Galveston or anywhere else, then they've got something they can grab and fidget with. It's just less, it reduces their irritability and keeps them more engaged and on task with whatever we're doing. And then if you're choosing summer camps, I would say for our kiddos with ADHD brains, I would go for active summer camps whenever you can. Anytime they incorporate physical activity into whatever the summer camp is about, then that's going to be a good thing for them and reduce some or prevent some problems. So chores, I mentioned earlier that chores are great for our kids with ADHD, and there's a bunch of reasons why. But first of all, they do need to be age appropriate. You can find lots of these lists online. This is just a quick example of a list that organizes it based on age group and what chores might be appropriate for each age group. But every child of every age can be doing something to help the family and to help around the house. And it has all of these benefits. It boosts their self-esteem. It gives them a sense of competence, that they feel like they've done something productive. And then it really helps with developing grit, that sense that they can do hard things and they can get through them. So a good work ethic. And this is a really a struggle for our kids with ADHD. And I've faced this with clients for years. I've seen our kids just really struggle with that development of grit. They are quick to give up on things and or quit if it's too hard or too boring, and it's just hard for them to get through things like that are just not as fun. And so we need to help them practice and work towards that development of a good work ethic. And I think the summertime and chores is a great way to do that. And you can also give them a way to make it a little more fun so they can get through it easier. I mean, some of the kids that I've worked with, we've used timers and stopwatches to kind of make it a race, see how much you can get done in a certain amount of time, or turn on music when it's chore time, and have music playing in the background to just put everybody in a little bit better mood. You can also rotate the chores so they're not doing the same thing every day or every week. And that our kids with ADHD brains tend to really like novelty, so that can be helpful. So there's lots of ways to make it easier. I also would suggest, when you give them some chores, be very specific.
I think we have her frozen just for a minute. She might have an
Going to
internet.
be hard for them because that
Lindsay, you cut out a little bit. We didn't hear you. It was freezing on our end.
after step one. So, uh-huh. What'd you say? Sorry.
It was freezing a little bit, but it's better now.
Oh, is it better now? Okay. I'm sorry about that. Let me know if that happens again. Is it doing okay right now?
Yes, it's good.
Okay. Let me go back real quick. Okay, so another thing I want to mention about doing these chores is that practice is really important for kids with ADHD because we're teaching them good habits. They may not think of these things automatically and do these things automatically, but the more that we go through the motions of practicing, then they will learn and they will carry those habits with them into the future. And so they may need more practice than a child with a non-ADHD brain, but that's okay. And so just practice, practice, practice. That's a good thing for them. And we do know from the research that doing chores as a child is linked to long-term success, even more than many other factors that have been researched. And so this is a really big one, and that's why I wanted to include it in here. Now, behaviors I know can be a challenge in the summertime, and we could do a whole presentation just on behavior, but I want to just give you guys a few of kind of the basic tips for how to manage behavior in kids with ADHD in the summertime. We talked before about supervision. They do need adult supervision. I don't recommend leaving them home all day alone, including teenagers. And what I mean by adult supervision when it's a teen is make sure that there's some oversight. Make sure you're checking in with them frequently, make sure that they know what to expect, make sure you know where they go, who they're with. They do need supervision. Routines, we mentioned that earlier, but following the routines will actually prevent some arguments and behavior issues. So that's actually one of the strategies for managing behavior. Define the rules, keep them very visual, have a list of rules for the summertime, and they might be the same rules as the school year as well. But sometimes we need to also make specific rules for different situations. So if they're going to be going to summer camp, then what are the rules and expectations for while they're at summer camp? If you're going to go on a vacation, what are the rules and expectations? Make sure to define those rather than punishing after the fact, because we're not really setting them up for success when we do that. They need one instruction at a time. This is also really an important one. Our kids with ADHD tend to really struggle with multi-step instructions because they may hear the first one and they may hear the last one, but everything in between may fall to the wayside. So just one instruction at a time, let them accomplish that, and then give another instruction. And then there's going to be less struggle. Reminders are necessary. I would just be ready to give some reminders. And if you can keep things visual, like have signs or reminder signs on the wall, have lists of things, pictures, all of that is going to be helpful because you will hopefully have to give less reminders. Use some tools like timers, stopwatches, setting alarms. Those tools can be also really helpful in reducing conflict and arguments and frustration. And then they pick up very quickly on when we don't follow through. It's pretty funny how often I have kids tell me that, oh yeah, my mom says she'll do this, but she never does. So I'm not worried that she's going to do that. They pick up on that really quickly. So always follow through. Make sure that they understand that if you give a warning, you will follow through on that so that they will listen the first time rather than continue to push and push. And then the flip side is make sure that you notice when they're doing what they should be doing, they're making effort, they're trying, they're accomplishing things. Make sure that that gets noticed and not overlooked. So point it out, let them know that you saw it, be very specific about what you saw. And that doesn't have to be focused on the end result, but it can be focused on the effort, letting them know I saw you really trying to work on cleaning your room today. And it doesn't matter if it was perfect, but letting them know that you were really trying hard and I saw that and I really appreciate that. Setting up some incentives that can be daily rewards or that can be weekly rewards. And it doesn't have to be things. It can be, that fun Friday can be something that can be earned through getting their chores done, doing their reading time, following rules. Then on Friday, they get to have that fun Friday. So having something fun that they can work towards is motivating for them. I put this example of a behavior chart here, this color system behavior chart. We've used this a lot. I use this with my kids. I've used it with clients. I've used it in classrooms that I've worked with. And the reason I like this chart is because you start in the middle, you start in on the green. And we used ours on the fridge with a magnet, and we would move the magnet up and down. And the goal is not to punish. The goal is not to move them down. The goal is to look for ways to move them up because the more they're moving up, the more they will keep trying to move up. You kind of are trying to set them up for success. And if they do move down, they may lose a privilege, but then they still get to move back up. And you can even start over halfway through the day so that they can start fresh. But this type of chart tends to work really well for multiple ages. Um, and then the academic support piece. Like I said, it doesn't have to be a huge focus, but we want to prevent that summer slide that tends to happen with all kids, but it's particularly an issue with our kids with ADHD. Um, when they kind of get out of practice for some of these academic skills, then that can be tough on them when school starts. So, whatever areas of concern that each of your children may have, kind of identify any areas that they need some extra practice or some extra help and just have a little bit of learning time every day. This is really good practice for them. It's a good routine because if they still stay in that routine of having some learning time every day, then when they start the school year, it's not such a huge change of going from all fun to all learning. So make it just a normal part of every day. And it's good practice for them, a good habit, and it's also going to be helping them to prevent that summer slide and improve some of their skills. But keep it very fun and hands-on because that's the way the ADHD brain works. If things are interesting and fun and engaging, then that switch gets turned on and they're going to be more likely to follow it through and to store it and remember what they learned. So make sure to make it fun if you can. Also include a variety of things and you can use multi-sensory activities whenever possible. You can do lots of repetition and practice for certain skills. The summer is a great time for that, and they do well with the repetition and the practice. And it's a good time for tutoring. And I would say that the tutors make sure that you choose a tutor that is a good fit for your child who understands how their brain works, how to work with them, uses these strategies that I have on the screen here. But you can do a variety of things, flashcards, worksheets, board games, computer games, use manipulative so it's very hands-on. They can jump on the trampoline while they're practicing their spelling words. They can go outside and toss a ball back and forth while they're practicing their times tables. You know, you can just make it interesting and fun, and it'll be a good time for them to practice and improve those skills. So,
But Lindsay, I wanted to add something that I think was important for my kids.
mhm.
Um, for college, when you've got they're leaving school as a junior, they're starting their senior year, working on those college essays over the summer. There's usually three essay prompts.
Yeah.
Um, it wasn't fun. So that was kind of against your slide of fun. But
Yeah.
what it was smart,
Yeah.
because when school starts and sports start and everything else starts, I mean, it was almost all we could do to get those essays done in the summer. But you know what we did? We did get them done. And so when school started and we started applying for colleges and we had to have those essays, it was a quick edit and off it went. It wasn't tears and agony. And if I do the essay, I can't get my homework done, or it's just, it's
Yeah.
really a lot. And that senior year comes fast and furious. And as much fun as everybody wants that senior year to be, there is a lot of stressors that come with it, and that was one thing that I would say made a big difference of
Yeah.
just getting it done.
I completely agree. That's such a good point. And we're actually exactly at that place. This summer, we're going to be working on college essays. And I do think a lot of what I have on these slides is directed more towards younger kids, but thinking towards high schoolers and teenagers, it's a lot of this does still apply, but it's going to look a little bit different. So, yeah, the learning time for a high schooler and especially a junior or senior in high school is going to look different. They may be using the summertime to to take a course. And this is also going to depend so much on your child and what would benefit them. You know, some kids need tutoring, some kids need enrichment over the summer. They might want to take an extra course that they can't take during the school year. Um, but
And for high schoolers, that might be the ACT or the SAT prep
yes,
courses,
prep.
which
Hmm.
are online. Some are free, some are paid for, some are better than others. But that
Yes.
might be one too, like for if you have a freshman or a sophomore, that's and one other one I'd like to mention for some of the older kids is it's the TSI, the Texas Success
Yeah.
Initiative. That's
Hmm.
the entrance exam for the university or the community college, and they test reading, writing, and math. And so that's a good one to take to see. Basically, what that test tells you is if they go into college, will they have to take non-credit courses to get up to speed, or are they on track to be able to take 4 credit courses at higher education? And if they're not on track, well, the first thing I want to say is half of America is not on track. So don't fret. It's not the end of the world. They might be on track for reading and writing and not math or vice versa. But there's all kinds of practice tests and other things where you can close that gap. So if they failed it, so what? Then what do we need to do to close the gap? So that way, when it comes time for the higher education, that they are not having to take the non-credit courses to get up to speed. So just a suggestion there.
That's a great suggestion. And I think in general, the summertime, you can use it wisely, especially with the older kids. Take advantage of that time to make sure that the year is more balanced for them. Because, like you said, once school starts, for a lot of our kids with ADHD brains who are in high school, it is a struggle. You know, they're balancing a lot. It's overwhelming. Many times they get behind. And if they can use the summer to kind of help spread some of that out and balance some of that out, that's going to be really helpful for them. Another thing I would add to that is what I suggested here, having this learning time, daily learning time every summer for all of your kids, no matter what age they are. It helps prepare them for that. Because one thing that I did not want is for, I have kids who are GT and they are um, not necessarily needing extra tutoring and academic support over the summer, but I did not want them to get in the habit of doing nothing over the summer. And then they hit high school and they actually need to do some things over the summer that are productive. And I wanted them to be ready for that. So, my oldest is taking an extra course this summer. He's also going to be working on developing an app. He's also going to be working on college applications. And so, but the thing is, he's used to that because every summer there's been something that he worked on. And so it's not something new or difficult for him to manage. And I wanted that to be the case with all of them, no matter where they're at academically. So I think it's just a good habit to start at a young age. And I should mention one more thing. When I mentioned the fun, I think we just need to keep a balance. I also have worked with families that they're kind of expecting too much from their kids over the summer, and they do need time, some downtime. They do need to have fun. They do need to have some breaks, other types of learning experiences. And so make sure they have a balance as well, and you don't load them up with too much over the summer. So, one question I get a lot is whether kids should continue their medication over the summer if they take ADHD medication. And there's some thoughts that I have on that that I just wanted to share. First of all, for anyone who has not tried medication or is still kind of on the fence, the purpose of it is to turn that switch on and to stimulate those areas of the brain that are not stimulated so that it will improve those ADHD symptoms. The medications are very beneficial, but there's side effects that you have to discuss with the doctors, and you also it's not gonna have the same effect with every child. And so it's really a trial and error process. But I just want you to know the purpose behind it, which is to turn that switch on. So because of that, over the summer, if your child is taking medication during the school year and you're considering taking a break for the summer, you absolutely can do that. But one thing to think about is that it can also be helpful during the summertime, depending on what your plans are. So if they're going to be doing a summer camp or some tutoring over the summer, they may benefit from using that medication at least during the times whenever they are needing to be able to sit and focus and use those executive functioning skills. Some kids, it depends on the severity of their challenges too. So I've worked with lots of clients who they just do best if they stay on that medication because without it, there might be lots more conflicts, lots more hyperactivity, and challenges. And so they may do better over the summer while on the medication. I also think sometimes the summer can be a good time to monitor the effectiveness because during the school year, I will ask parents, how the medication is going. And they oftentimes won't know unless they've had feedback from the teacher because you're not there at school to observe, right? So during the summer, you are there. Well, maybe you might be there more and spend more time with your child. And so you might be able to more closely monitor the effectiveness or any side effects. So it's a good time to kind of watch and it's a good time to make adjustments. So if it needs to be increased or if you need to change the medication, the summer is a good time for that so that you can have it figured out before school starts. So we've done that with a lot of clients. I don't prescribe medication, but these are just my thoughts on it. You would need to talk to a psychiatrist or your pediatrician to find out more about prescribing. But these are just some suggestions and ideas if you're thinking about taking a break or not taking a break or starting a medication over the summer.
I do love the idea of like if you had one medication and it wasn't working and you wanted to try a new one, the summer is a good time for that because sometimes, I mean, every person, reacts differently to a medication. So having time for that. And then the other thing that I had a thought on too is to medicate or not to medicate. That's not the question that we're talking about.
Right.
But like if they stay on or don't stay on, you said something, you said a lot, but you said something right there of like, maybe they have increased anger or they have increased behaviors that are less than ideal. And what I see is a lot of our kids they struggle with relationships. Maybe some of them struggle to make friends. Most of them struggle to keep friends. So maybe they don't have a problem making friends, but then keeping friends. And so to me, part of that is the medication management too, depending on the interaction that they're having around others and those relationships and how give and take those relationships are or not, may also have an impact. I do think that's very important because I think relationships, the lack of friends or the friends that have gone away, it's a big hurt for our kids. It's a big, big hurt, and it happens over and over and over again. So it's
You're
my two
right.
cents on that.
That is so common in the kids that I've worked with over the years. And there are multiple ways over the summer also to kind of address that, making sure that they're having some social interactions through play dates, summer camps, going to the park and interacting with other kids. And it's a good time to kind of observe those interactions because, again, you're not at school to observe. So in the summertime, do a little more observing and see what are some things that they're struggling with socially, and we can coach them. We can get them into social skills groups. We can get them into a therapist where they can one-on-one work on some of those social skills, or they can also develop friendships over the summer that can then be carried on through the school year. So I think there's definitely ways to work on that. Um, Vacation tips. So this is another thing that comes up with a lot of my clients looking ahead towards the summer. Parents are nervous. They're planning vacations, but they're wondering how can we make sure this goes smoothly? So these are some suggestions that I've given over the years is of course pack your patience because with our kiddos with ADHD, it's a perfect storm. Going on vacations can sometimes be a perfect storm for some of our typical ADHD problems because of all the things I mentioned at the beginning. Structure is changing, expectations are changing, environment is changing, sleep is changing, everything changes on vacation. So I would say, as much as you can, keep some of those things in place. So keep some structure and routine in place, even if it's just the bedtime routine or the waking up and brushing your teeth and getting dressed routine, but just keep some routines in place and some structure. Make sure to talk about the rules, which a lot of families kind of leave that out. But I think talking about that again beforehand, before they go into this vacation, so they know what to expect, is really helpful for kids. And I keep saying this, but we assume that they know. And you would really be surprised in all my years of working with kids. There's just so many situations where I've heard from the kids. They felt like they didn't know. They didn't know they weren't supposed to do this or that. And we just need to be really, really clear with them. It's also good for them to know the plans, the vacation plans in advance, just because, again, it gives them some structure. And so you can even, if you're going to be gone for a week, you can even kind of visually show them on the calendar, this is what we're going to be doing each day or who we're going to be visiting each day so they know what to expect from that. With my kids now, we're at a point where we use a shared calendar. Um, and they are, and the one that we use is called Time Tree, but they're all on that calendar electronically. And so anytime I add something, they all see it. So all three of them are really good about checking the calendar and they really like to know what's on there and what's coming. I would also really use some of these vacation times for some digital detox. I really highly recommend this. It's a great time, a great excuse to just say, okay, we're going to go screen free on this trip, or maybe have some screen free zones where if you're doing certain things, like you're at Disney World, then that should not be a time to be on screens. And so make sure that you kind of incorporate that a little bit or into the full trip. I think that's such a good thing for them. And you'll see a major difference in them, in their behavior, in their engagement, um, their level of stimulation also will change quite a bit. I have a lot of prevention strategies, especially for our kind of elementary and preschool age kids, but this applies to teens as well, very much. Making sure that they are getting enough sleep, make sure you have snacks with you. I always have a bag of snacks in the car or on the airplane. As long as they're getting those snacks, then they're getting stimulation to the brain, just like with the fidget toys. They're getting movement, so it's keeping their brain stimulated. So in my mind, I'm just always trying to keep some things with me and plan ahead so that I can keep their brain stimulated, make sure their brain is at its best. They've gotten enough sleep, they've had their meals for the day, they know what the expectations are. Also, just building in active time throughout the vacation is important, but also building in quiet time because of that tendency to get overstimulated on vacation. They might need some breaks for some quiet time, not necessarily napping, but maybe just some quiet time in the hotel room or some calm, relaxation time at the beach so that things aren't just go, 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 which is likely to lead to some tantrums and some overstimulation if they're not getting those breaks. Make sure you pack supplies and activities and be prepared for keeping them busy and keeping them occupied at times when they need to sit and be still and be quiet, because those times are going to be extra hard on them. And then vacation is really a time to keep up the praise, because and what I see families kind of fall into is more the irritability. Parents are stressed because they're trying to deal with travel, which is stressful. And so we tend to be more irritable towards them and tell them, stop doing that, quit it, don't bother your brother, sit still. And we tend to do less of the praising during that time. So really make a conscious effort to keep it up. So at the airport, if you see some good behavior, point it out. On the plane, point out the good behavior. Make sure you keep that up because it'll keep them motivated to keep trying. Um, and then summer camps, just a few things I would mention. I didn't list specific summer camps because there's too many. I did put a website at the bottom that's kind of a helpful website, houstonsummercamps.com. It lists a lot of the summer camps around the Houston area that are offered. So you can check that out. But these are some questions to think about when you have kids with ADHD. Is it a camp that provides some structure, some routine, some supervision? If there's no structure, it's just a free-for-all with a whole bunch of kids, that could be a recipe for disaster for some of our kiddos. Do they have hands-on activities, or is it more of an academic focused summer camp where they're just going to be sitting at a desk and writing? that's going to be much more difficult for them. They need to have hands-on, they need to have physical activity and movement. So finding out if a camp includes those things, even if it is an academically focused camp, do they take breaks to move and get out of their seats? Are they flexible with letting them use fidget toys and use manipulatives? Also, are there opportunities to socialize? In most summer camps, there are, but that is a great way to work on and build those social relationships. And some of our kids have very preferred interests, things that just they hyper focus on that they really enjoy. And summer camps are a great way to give them more of that. If you have a child who's great at art and that's just a great outlet for them, then doing a summer camp that's art focused is wonderful. For my kids, like one of mine has done coding camps, which has been great for him. One of mine does some art summer camps. One of mine is wanting to do a cooking camp, is very, very interested in cooking. And so these are just good ways to explore their interests and encourage their interests, to keep them busy also. But before they go to the summer camp, discuss the rules and expectations, especially with younger kiddos. Make sure they understand what is expected and what are the rules. And I would check in with the counselors. So a lot of my clients, I'll ask the parents, how did the camp go? And they'll say, I think it went okay. I don't know. I didn't hear anything. But if it were me as a parent, I want to know how they did. Are they interacting with other kids? How was their behavior? Did they seem to have fun? Did they, just ask questions, talk to the counselors, and check in with them. And if you get a sense that this is not a great fit from those discussions, then pay attention to that. Because if it's a camp where there's a camp counselor who's kind of overly harsh or nitpicking every little behavior, that's not going to be a great experience for them. Um, and then there's groups. The summer is a great time to sign your kids up for more kind of social and emotional focused groups. There's lots of groups offered from different practices around the Houston area that focus on lots of things: social skills, executive functioning skills, emotion regulation. There's some that are focused specifically on like anxiety or social anxiety, which is a big thing for our kids, and confidence building groups. And they're for all ages. I listed a few of the ones that I've just seen recently, probably in the past month or two. I've seen on the local mental health Facebook pages. These are advertisements for groups that are going to be going on this summer that are offered by these practices. And there's going to be others as well. So it's a great time to try a group. These groups are usually very short. They might be 4 weeks long, 6 weeks long. And they are usually small. They may have like 6 or 8 kids in a group. Some of them they're all going to be based on age. So, some of them might be based on elementary age, middle school, high school. So I would definitely look into these groups are really beneficial for our kids with ADHD because it's a great way for them to work on some of these skills, but in a social way with peers, same age peers, and with someone who is trained in this and knows how to work with them. And usually the school year is a hard time to do it because there's not a lot of time available. So the summer is a great time for that. So my last thought is just also take some time to slow down yourself as a parent so that you can really use the summer to build that connection, that strong connection with your child. And that's really the foundation for our kids doing well in the long term, is that strong connection that we have with them as parents, regardless of what the world tells them or the negative feedback they get from others. If they have that connection with us and that good relationship with us, it kind of serves as a buffer. And the summertime is the ideal time to work on that. So if you can take some time off work or spend some time in the afternoons with them or on the weekends, go on vacations together, I think the summer is a perfect time to build that connection. So that was my last slide. This is just a little bit of information about our practice and my website and my contact information. On the website, I have a resources tab that has referrals for local psychiatrists, therapists. I have some articles on there. I have those webinars that I mentioned, previous webinars, lots of helpful resources and websites. So you can check that out and feel free to contact me if you have specific questions or you need advice on anything in particular. Or if you need testing and evaluation for your child, then feel free to reach out and I can send you more information. So that's all I have.
Lindsay, as usual, you are awesome. And I can personally say that the testing is awesome. I've had more than one of my kids tested with Lindsay. And, to me, it's not about a label. So to test or not to test, there's that question too of, do I really want a label and does that label really follow me? And I would say no, but what it does do is it gives us the information that we need to be able to customize next for our kids that is going to be the best fit for them and where they are. So if there are other diagnoses, if there's suspected diagnoses, finding that and getting whatever treatment it is that they need for those types of things, if any. And maybe it's just some of the testing can flesh out learning disabilities or other things like that and could make it a lot easier for accommodations or pave the way for accommodations for education. So whether that's elementary school, middle school, high school, or on the college level, I would say that a lot of our kids have learning differences, and those accommodations are very, very key for a lot of them for success. Maybe it's extra time. Maybe it is testing in a distracted area or a smaller room. Maybe they get an extra set of books at home. Whatever it is, there's so many different accommodations out there, but the testing, shows what those accommodations, what they might benefit from. So I just wanted to say I think that it's a great thing. And I know a lot of the colleges, I will say that they do require, so if you know your student is going to need accommodations on the college level, first, the frustrating thing is all of the colleges have different requirements. They all have a disability office. It might be called the Office of Disability or Disability Services or what have you. And their timelines of how old the testing can be differ. It's usually about 3 years. It can't be older than 3 years. I've seen them push to 5. I've also seen them take very old testing along with a letter from the psychologist or psychiatrist saying I've followed this person, or the MD for this many years, the condition is the same, the accommodations remain the same, and these are our recommendations. I've also seen them take very old testing, but my point is, if you do have a higher education student or a student heading that direction, don't wait. You don't want them to start the first semester with both hands behind their back, while you're waiting to get testing and then waiting to get the results. So I would just suggest, if your testing is really, really old and you know they need accommodations, be checking out what that specific college or community college or university, what their requirements are, so that way you have them in on time.
Yes, I 100% agree.
For
That's
sure.
good advice.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Everybody's going to get a copy of tonight's slide and a link to the recording, and it will also have Lindsay's contact information in there as well. And I thank you for taking your time to be here with us tonight. And Lindsay, thank you for always all your great ideas. I love it. So thanks so
You're
much.
welcome. Bye,
Take care.
everyone.
Bye now.